Welcome to the Women in Engineering podcast. Today, we have the first episode in our brand new dual degree series. To kick off the series, we have special guest Natalya Whitla, who's in fourth year integrated engineering, pursuing a dual degree with Ivy HBA. Natalya, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm really honored that I'm your first dual degree series. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be a good one.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
I'm going to start just asking you a little bit of like why you chose to pursue this dual degree specifically.
Right. Yeah. I think it makes a little bit of sense just in terms of, describing the dual degree a little bit. That might mess up a few of your future questions, but it gives people a good idea of maybe why I chose it. But basically, the Ivy Eng dual degree is set up so that you graduate, you get not only your Bachelor of Engineering Science, but you also get your honors of business administration with the Ivy program. So first, one of the reasons was I didn't want to do any more school after I graduated. I kind of just wanted my degree to be good, and then I would be able to get a job and be good with that kind of education. And then if I wanted to come back, it would be after some time working in the workforce. And I think it really sets you up well for that. But it also ends up being 5 years too. So, no, everyone thinks 4 years of university is too short. So it's nice to get to be here for another year and not necessarily on internship. But so that's part of the reason. But really, I'm kind of that person in high school that didn't want to choose to narrow in on anything. I took all of the sciences, all of the maths, as you have to do for Eng, but I also took history all the way through, accounting all the way through, and French all the way through. So my interests were just all over the place. Because of that, I never exactly felt like just doing something very specific would fit who I was. And so that kind of what brought me to integrated as well, because integrated is that combination of some of the engineering disciplines. And when I combine that with business, I think that way I'll be able to kind of speak the languages of the technical degrees and kind of understand the language and how the math works. And it kind of goes along with that logic and the very math oriented brain that I have. But at the same time, I can use that language to lead teams better, or, do more project management style roles where I'd be doing that business organization. So I know that was a really long answer, but I wanted to kind of give an explanation of what it was first.
Oh, no, I think honestly, it's kind of nice hearing more than just one point too, because there could be something that someone relates to where they don't relate to a different point that you mentioned. So pulling all those things together is definitely beneficial if people are kind of in the same boat. And okay, so what does the Ivy dual degree look like in terms of number of years? I know you said 5, but what courses you take, when you take them, all that stuff.
Yeah, so it is a 5-year program, kind of we've already been talking about here, but what it is you take the first year just like normal engineering, the same kind of combined, the general first year, you take the general first year with everybody else. And then in second year, you pick your discipline and do a second year Eng normal. But then third year is entirely HBA. You're not technically accepted into the dual degree program until you finish your first year of HBA, which is why it's all business. And then when you get into your fourth and fifth years, they're combined. But as much as combined really means, it really means a fourth year of an entirely Eng. And you take one business course, one Ivy course. And then in your fifth year, it's a little closer to 50-50. Basically, all of your non-technical electives become business electives with Ivy.
Okay, so all the things that essentially when you're pursuing your engineering degree, you have the mandatory technical stuff and whatever that you have to take, all the non-tech stuff, they just wrap that in with Ivy. So it's not like you have to take that separately.
Yeah, so instead of getting to choose your non-technicals and they're just from a list, you take Canadian geography, or you take zombie apocalypse or whatever it is, you end up taking your accounting and your economics, but also maybe your marketing or your I'm doing the sustainability certificate as part of my Ivy degree. So I'm going to be taking sustainability business courses as part of it.
And do you get to choose those?
You get to take 6 Ivy courses in your last year, 3 of which are mandatory, the other 3 you choose.
Okay, so still some choice, because I know
yes.
For my degree, we don't really get choice till fourth year. So with dual degrees, sometimes you just lose it altogether.
Well, yeah, I don't get choice until 5th year, and even then I choose from a list. So.
Yeah. But you get the extra degree, so it's worth it.
Yeah, so well, and also I'm not the type of person who wants to pick my classes. I'm super happy to get going from a list.
Yeah. And so are there any opportunities specifically associated with pursuing an Eng Ivy degree?
So I see, kind of this is where scholarships would come in. So as like a woman in Eng and Ivy pursuing the dual degree, there is the opportunity when you apply for the program to apply for the Linamar scholarship as well. So like kind of in terms of timeline, like the Ivy applications are end of January and the application for the Linamar is February 18th this year. So it's kind of like following by about 2 weeks. And then you do your interviews and get your Linamar acceptance before you have to accept Ivy. So you kind of know like, will I have this financial support? But it is 50% of your tuition, which is a big deal because Ivy is like 24 grand. So it ends up being like 12 grand. And then they also offer you like a job for the summer. So that way you don't necessarily have to do recruitment. I didn't personally pursue that option just because I wasn't looking to work in the automotive industry, but there are people that do, and like they're super happy. So the scholarship's like really key. There are more than just that one, but that would be definitely a big one for a woman in Eng.
And so you mentioned that they have like co-ops for available. Are those business co-ops or are they engineering or can you choose?
Yeah, so they're both. So Linamar is obviously a big business, which means that they're going to have like their automotive roles, which might be on the line or doing quality assurance or, working in their innovation or their R&D, whatever it is. But then because they're such a big company, they also obviously have their business side too. So you might be working in like HR, like in finance or accounting or whatever it is. So basically the answer is yes, there's both.
Okay. And you can choose, I'm guessing?
Yes. Well, you would apply and then they would pick, obviously, but like it's guaranteed acceptance. And I don't know anyone who didn't get a job they wanted.
Okay. That's good to know because
Yeah,
definitely nice to have some options to explore.
exactly. Right. Getting the scholarship's the hard part. The job part's not hard.
And so yeah, kind of following on with jobs, what like jobs or career paths would this dual specifically lead to or like help get?
Yes. So everyone always asks like integrated engineering, like what can you really do with that? Like it's not super specific. And my answer for that is super cheesy, but it's along the lines of like the world is changing, problems are becoming more complex, and diversity is like increasing in strength in terms of like a job asset. Now I'm not necessarily going to be the person who's going to be like coding the program or like designing the robot myself, but I don't want to do that, right? Like I chose my degree because I wanted to be in more of a management role or, working in manufacturing, maybe doing like lean manufacturing where I'm doing like there's a word for the type of like systems engineering, right? Something along those lines. So if you're in integrated engineering, you can almost pursue a lot of mechanical roles, manufacturing, construction management, and like other project management specific, or you can do, that's kind of the Eng side. If you're doing like more of a business side, you could literally do almost any business role within an Eng firm. That's kind of where like they meet. And a lot of people end up doing consulting as well. So whether that's Eng consulting or whether that's business consulting, there's a lot of consultants that come out of this degree for sure. But so the reason I mentioned that is because that's what I specifically am planning on pursuing, but there are a lot of options.
I guess, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because obviously engineering firms are businesses. They need business people to help run them.
Yeah, exactly.
As much as we love, as much as we love coding, I don't think you can code a business to run. You need some business brains for that. Are there any requirements for applying to the Ivy HBA dual degree?
Essentially, it's anyone who's applying for Ivy would be like applying for like the dual, essentially. So if you're applying from Eng to go into Ivy, you have to maintain a 78 average, and that's average across both of your first years. So you don't have to have like a 78 in first year and like a 78 in second year. It could be like a 76 and then an 80, as long as it balances out across the 2 years. And that's minimum. Of course, better is always better when you're applying. And then you also need to have like some sort of extracurricular or leadership experience. So I'll kind of like move on in terms of like how you would actually apply. And kind of how that relates because they're really connected. But when you're when you're applying, there's kind of two options. And the first would be directly out of high school. When you apply for like Western, you would apply for the AEO program as well, or like the advanced acceptance opportunity. I personally did have that, but I know a lot of people who didn't, and it would basically be, advanced entry opportunity, not advanced acceptance, because that would be AAO. But anyway, so the advanced acceptance opportunity, and from that, it takes your grades from high school, and as long as you maintain the minimum requirements, you're already accepted. So that would be like the average, and then like maintaining 2 to 3 extracurriculars. So on that note, that would be like one option where you could kind of pursue through it. It would be like from high school, and then the other would be if you don't do that, or you don't get accepted for AEO, you do it in your second year. So it would be right around the time I mentioned earlier, just like late January, and you apply for Ivy the same way you normally would. You have to write your essays, which are like experience essays, submit your grades, and then in that application you specify, like, there's like one check mark that says you want to pursue a dual degree. But as I mentioned earlier, you're not actually accepted into the dual degree until you finish your HBA 1 year. But I literally don't even know anyone who didn't do it. I know one person who didn't even maintain the grades, and he still got accepted into the into the dual. So once you're in kind of thing.
Yeah. And I guess, so that makes a lot of sense. So the application is the same for everyone, either in high school or in second year, and then it only becomes a dual after that third year.
Yes, exactly. I don't have much else to respond.
I was just clarifying, don't worry.
Okay, yeah.
And so I know you mentioned like the third year is all just like pure Ivy HBA, your first year of that. So how do you stay connected with the Eng community while you complete those courses, and even like later courses for your dual?
Yeah, no, totally fair. I would say that first of all, there's a lot of engineers who do the dual degree. Like, it's not just me. The only other person in my starting cohort, like, he also did integrated. So like now he also did Ivy. So now we're like out of Ivy together and back in Eng together. So basically you don't necessarily stay connected to the Eng community in terms of whatever, like, you wouldn't join like new Eng extracurriculars. Usually you just maintain the ones you're already in. And you kind of still are communicating with the friends you already have, because you're like still going to be on campus, and like you're still gonna have roommates and all that good stuff. But there are like a lot of engineers that go into Ivy, and so then you use that opportunity in Ivy to almost like meet more business people, maybe make some more friends. But then you still have those engineers that are coming back with you when you come back for your fourth year. When you come back though, a lot of people end up being on internship, because that's like the fourth year is when a lot of people do internship if they're doing like the total of 5 years. So you might not come back to everybody you left with. You might come back to only some of them, but then there's going to be more that come back in your fifth year for anyone who's like returning from internship. But basically the gist of it is kind of, you maintain your clubs, you pretty much like maintain your friends, but you also get to make new ones.
Yeah, honestly, that sounds pretty good. I guess like we don't really realize how important just the people we know are in terms of information. And I know you mentioned, so you said most people don't join a new club. Are you still able to, like, say you're in second year? Because I feel like this is a common thing for a lot of second years this year, is there was a club you didn't know about because first year was online, and first semester, the whole thing with Clubs Week. Are you still able to join Eng clubs, even if you're pursuing the dual, like in your third year?
Oh, 100%. No one cares. Like, even if you joined an Eng club and you never were an Eng, like, they don't care. It's really just about like your willingness to be there, your effort, and like your skills, right?
Okay,
so
that's good to know. I feel like a lot of even the first years and second years now, there's so many clubs we're just finding out about through grapevine, and they're really interesting, but we're like, oh, maybe now is not the time to apply because we were back online and everything's in the air.
Yeah, well, it's that, but I'll think about the other side of it too, right? Like, we want younger people that we want to be able to kind of keep on our club after we leave. So we're always looking for new people.
Makes sense. And did you find it difficult going back to like the math, the technical, like engineering courses from when you were in the HBA year and like doing that HBA stuff?
Fun question. So it is interesting. I would say everyone who's non-Eng who goes into Ivy, like, it's a big difference for them, right? Like, they can no longer pick their courses. They no longer have any choice over their schedule. They have like lots of deadlines and, you know, lots of group projects, and it's very overwhelming for them. Whereas the engineers, you know, maybe we don't do group projects, so that's new, but like the way Ivy structures everything is you're only focused on one deadline at a time. Like they do it very smart, and they structure it very well that you're only ever doing one thing at a time. But especially being an integrated, when your schedule is just the combination of other discipline schedules, like you are not thought of that way. All my deadlines are at the same time. Like if I'm even just talking about this year, I have like 3 midterms one week, nothing for an entire week, and then like 3 more the next week. Like everything's at once. They don't think about us. So when you're in Ivy, it's nice. Everything's like well structured. You know, you have everything one at a time. You can focus on each thing without worrying. So it's almost like a break, and you're like, okay, cool. Now I can pursue other interests, or I can pursue recruiting, or I can learn how to do interviews better, all of those things. And people kind of expand their interests. But then when you come back to Eng, it is a bit of a shock, right? Like nothing's arbitrary. Your grades aren't being rounded to an 80% every single time, so they matter a little bit more. And I will say it is less stressful. Like you come into this knowing, you leave Ivy knowing that like grades are a little more arbitrary, which kind of relieves a lot of the stress. Or you leave Ivy like maybe with a job or some kind of job prospects, so that kind of alleviates the stress as well. But it's harder. Like there's a right answer now, and you got to come back to that. So I would say it was definitely difficult, but it's not unmanageable. Like if you're the type of student that wants to do a dual degree and you're successful in getting into the dual degree, you can do it. Like it's tough, it's going to be hard work, but you can do it.
I've heard that a lot actually. It's like Ivy's the break year because engineers are so used to class all the time, don't get to choose, and that's what Ivy is. And so it's like you're doing all that hard stuff in first and second year, but there's like double integration, triple integration, CAD this bridge or whatever. And then in Ivy, you're just like, it's the same amount of work, but it's just like not as like there's a right answer. It's like a different kind of thinking is what I've heard.
Yeah, 100%. It's like very different, but like that's what you would expect, you know? It's like engineering is math, science, application of that knowledge, and business is like arbitrary ideas and like, you know, writing and strategy. And obviously you still have your numbers, and like those are the classes the engineers do the best in relative to their peers, but you know, it's less about the numbers and more about like interpreting them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's different, but it's good different.
Yes, exactly.
And what are some tips that you would give a student just to succeed with the stool?
Oh geez. Okay. Interesting. If we're talking like integrated and Ivy, very specifically like my degree, I would say to-do lists are my best friend, especially when I'm in Ivy, or sorry, especially when I'm in engineering, because everything's kind of happening on top of each other. So I just need to figure out, okay, what do I need to handle Monday? What do I need to handle Tuesday? You know, like kind of take it one day at a time. And that's really helpful for me. And the other big thing too is just trying your best to find those people in all of your classes. Because integrated, you're across all the disciplines, right? Like I have across this year, I've had classes in second year, third year, fourth year, mechanical, chemical, civil, tron, and electrical. Oh, sorry, not electrical, but like an electrical course, but not necessarily with electrical. You do that in previous years. Anyway, so you're in a bunch of you're with different people all the time. You get your integrated friends, like you guys will have each other and you'll get to meet each other all in second year. But beyond that, you're kind of, it's nice because I don't have to ask the same people for help every single class. You know, I can ask my mech friends for help with my mech courses, or I can ask, you know, my civil friends with that. And that's really nice. Not to mention that when you come back from Ivy, all the people that are your age from your starting year, they're a year older and they've already done everything you've done. So you get like extra help. So that sounds really bad. I'm like, oh yes, all you got to do is manipulate the system and use your friends. Obviously, you still need to learn it yourself, work hard, like kind of put your head down and work when you need to, but recognize that you do have a really good network there, and engineering is a team sport, and kind of so is Ivy in a lot of ways. So, you know, you have people to lean on, and I think that's important to kind of focus on. And another thing I want to say is when obviously it's important to kind of get into the dual degree, focus on your grades in first and second year. But you're going to do that anyway. Like you're there, you're pushing, but don't stress it too much. It is about your future, but you're still going to be successful. You're probably still going to do better, whether or not you spend that extra hour studying that one night at 1 a.m. versus, saving it for another time, or not going out on your birthday because you have a midterm in 3 days. Like it's a give and take, and you need to kind of have that balance in everything.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. I feel like that's a common trend from upper years of advice I've been given throughout the podcast is just don't get too overwhelmed and stressed and just like take a break sometimes.
Yeah. So what you're saying is I'm basic. I get it.
I think more so it's just like, I think everyone kind of comes to that same realization is what it is.
100%, especially when you're coming back from Ivy. Like,
and I guess, yeah, is there anything else you'd just like to add or share?
Not a lot. I guess my biggest advice would be like to join a club. Well, if we're talking just application purposes, you need to be able to talk about a club. So it's good to have something there on the resume, but at the same time, like that's where you meet people of common interests. That's where you're going to spend a lot of your time with like people that you like, hopefully. And I really think that it's an experience you shouldn't miss out on. So being in one club doesn't need to be more than one. It just needs to be one that you like. And that's really going to be helpful.
Yeah, I feel like clubs are just so good for just taking a break. Like, honestly, it's like we learn all this cool stuff and we have to do these like labs that are boring and you write this like big report. But a club is where you can just like go and be like, yeah, I like to CAD. Let me make something cool. And then like have it become a physical thing just for fun with no grades associated with it. And it's like nice to actually apply stuff we like without getting graded on it.
100%. And that's when you realize like how useful your skills actually are. Yeah.
Join a club.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I do want to say to all of our listeners, Natalya's information will be in the description box. So if you do want to reach out with more questions, feel free to do so.
It doesn't have to be about the dual degree. If you have questions about integrated, I know that there's not necessarily as many of us, so it might be hard to find an integrated person, especially upper years, because you don't always know upper years. Totally reach out to me about that or the dual degree.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, no worries. It's cool.
And to all of our listeners, have a great rest of your day.